introduce, but I'm giving you a high five right here for the good work you've been doing lately at Shopify. All right, hands on. Yeah, and Brian Hurley is hiding in that corner. I don't know why. This man has a plan. He keeps building big businesses all around, and he's helped reinitiate the Lead to Win program. And I've been a fortunate benefactor of that with my business, You Create Media. And I have to give a lot of love to a number of businesses in the room. It feels like almost a reunion for me. From the OCLF and Invest Ottawa, which are a mentoring company, to Sprott School of Business. I can't name them all, but what you have here is an ecosystem of entrepreneurs. Would you agree?
Yeah.
All right. So, without further ado, I wanted to bring a little bit of insight to the entrepreneur's life. It's not easy, right, entrepreneurs, to get the job done, correct? I see a head nods. Come on, get it louder, everybody, as an entrepreneur. All right. I'm seeking your love here, okay? All right. This is what it takes. It takes a great idea, doesn't it? That grand plan, that thing that keeps you up at night, you would say, I cannot do it unless I actually get it out of my head and put it into action. You know that feeling, right? Well, it's a hard job to have inspiration, right? But what's needed after that? Perspiration. So, next please. Oh. Here, no, you're gonna have to do this. Right. I can't multitask that great. Obviously. What you have to do is you have to diagnose. You have to diagnose the problem. What does your customer need? Are you really solving a problem? Are you just passionate about something? You got to get into the details. Okay? You got to look at the heart of the problem. Do you understand what is needed in your market space? And you got to be clinical about it. You got to be like your engineers that you're hiring to sweat it out. You got to put your jacket on and figure it out. And the only way to do that is to be like a doctor. So what I'm doing here tonight to help entertain you a little bit is to show you supporters and non-entrepreneurs what it is to experience the life of being an entrepreneur. So first off, it's about inspiration. Secondly, it's about being meticulous and being thorough, like a doctor who's taking care of your health. If you want mental health in the entrepreneurial game, you got to do your details, you got to do your homework and get the job done right. Okay, one back please. All right, but there's something else to this. Harley, maybe you can tell us what's needed to get a job done. Okay? Scotch. But that usually starts off a conversation about resources, right? So when I was in university, students help me out here. How many of you have used the money pot to try to get money to your parents, your friends, and your family? This is what I used for Frosh Week when we were Sprosh. I had this linked to my arm, and I go around Shinorama clinking for money in dollars, dialing for dollars, getting money raised. Who here has supported or fundraised for Shinorama? Fantastic, great organization. All right, you got to raise money. You can also pass a hat, right? Has it been done? Who here has raised money by passing a hat? It's not the way to do it. You got to do it the other way. I don't have it here, but maybe Harley could show us a term sheet. And that's the last thing that you do when you're an entrepreneur. You have to go through some pretty low times, finding out what money you need to get the job done, hiring people that you want on board. And sometimes it feels like you're at the lowest, but you have to maintain your focus, keep that inspiration in mind. So with that, I'm going to leave you at this moment because our next speaker, Harley, is going to tell us a story about what he's gone through in his business ventures. And if I could firstly introduce Mike Hahn for the Sprott School of Business to do a proper introduction, because they can't trust me with that duty. I thank you. Mike, please join me.
Thanks, Jason. Jason will be performing at Yuck Yucks Saturday night, 9 p.m. Thanks everybody for coming out. the Sprott School of Business, Carleton University, we're very proud to be sponsoring the event. It's great to see so many young, excited minds out there. And we have a great slate of speakers for you tonight, and it's my pleasure to introduce the first one. So, an entrepreneur, a lawyer, and chief platform officer at Shopify. Also a mentor and advisor working with Oaktree, Founder Fuel, and Extreme Startups. Graduate of the University of Ottawa, we won't hold that against him. Here to talk about entrepreneurial leadership, Harvey Finkelstein. Thank you. All right, I'm going to clean this up a little bit. So I don't have any props. Hope that's okay. Can I ask those of you that are at the back to please take like 30 steps forward? I don't care if you sit on the floor. I really want to have a really engaging crowd. Before I begin, I kind of want to say that, you know, the presentation, the talk I'm about to give, is based on an MBA course that I teach at Telfer. It's a 6-week course, and I'm doing it now. I thought I was doing it in 40 minutes. It turns out I only have 20 minutes to do it in, so there's going to be a lot of information. I hope I don't overwhelm anyone, but we'll try. Actually, Jason walked around, so maybe I'll walk around too. Can you guys see me? Yeah, okay. So one of the things or I should say, the two things I want to talk about today, first of all, are the definition of an entrepreneur. And I'm going to talk about a little bit what I think are the main tenets of entrepreneurship. And I want to start with the definition of an entrepreneur, because I think it's something that changes a lot, and it's fairly dynamic. So over the course of the last couple weeks, when I knew I was doing this talk, I did a bit of research on what an entrepreneur is, where the term comes from. And from what I gathered in my research, an entrepreneur, the definition came from a French economist named Jean-Baptiste Say in the 19th century. And the definition was actually pretty simple. It was one who undertakes an enterprise, especially a contractor, acting as intermediary between capital and labor. And with all due respect to Mr. Jean-Baptiste, I think he is full of shit. I don't think that's the definition of entrepreneur. I then read about this French economist named Richard Catalan, who says that an entrepreneur is someone who accepts full responsibility. And I think now we're getting a little bit closer to what my definition of an entrepreneur is. Should probably go to this slide while I just talk about this. In 1934, a Hungarian economist named Joseph Schumpeter talked about the fact that said that an entrepreneur is someone who's highly creative and who has a tendency to imagine new solutions by finding opportunities for profit and reward. And now that's, again, one step closer to what I think is an entrepreneur. But the best definition I've found so far is by a Harvard Business School professor named Howard Stevenson. And about 37 years ago, he came up with this definition, which reads as follows. Entrepreneurship is the pursuit of an opportunity without regard for resources currently controlled. It's pretty much in line with what I think an entrepreneur is. What I'd like to do over the course of the next 15 minutes is tell you a little bit about what I think are the DNA or the main tenets of entrepreneurship and what I think make a great entrepreneur. Those of you in the back, if you can please lower your voice just a little bit, that'd be awesome. Is that gonna work, you think, Doug? Let's make it feel really awkward. Okay. All right, so now that you guys know a little bit about the definition of entrepreneur, I want to talk about these tenets. And again, these tenets are not necessarily rules necessarily, they're just ideas that I've had on what makes a really good entrepreneur. And I want you to understand that when I say good entrepreneur, I don't mean successful entrepreneur. I think the determination of whether or not an entrepreneur is successful or a failure has nothing to do with whether or not he's an entrepreneur. It may have to do with circumstances, resources, or timing. But I'm going to take you through a couple of these tenets that I think are really interesting and helpful. So the first thing that I think is really important as an entrepreneur, and something that I learned really young, was the idea of risk tolerance. And what I mean by that is not necessarily being risk preferring or risk adverse, but actually rather knowing how far you're willing to push it. What is your limit of how far you want to go on a venture in your own sort of personal risk capacity? And I think once you kind of figure out how far you're willing to go with that, and you can go 1 foot further. That's sort of the area that you want to be in as an entrepreneur. And it took me a long time to kind of figure out what my own risk capacity is. Now that I know, it's really easy for me to make decisions because I know how much of a liability or how much on the edge I want to go. And one of the things that I think is interesting about the idea of risk tolerance is that when you speak to different entrepreneurs, they all seem to have very different risk tolerances, and I think it's a unique personal thing. And I think each of you needs to sort of figure out how far you're willing to go. I'm going to provide you a bit of an example for each of these tenets. And so for the example of risk tolerance, I want to tell you about, I assume most of you know about Shopify? Show of hands? Okay. So in 2009, Shopify decided to do a Build a Business contest with a guy named Tim Ferriss. And Tim Ferriss asked us to give out $10,000 in this contest, or I should say, this competition, which allowed entrepreneurs to start online stores, and with the entrepreneur with the highest revenue winning the contest. And $10,000 then was a lot of money for us. Tim then came back to us and said, please give $100,000 to make it more interesting. And that was basically what our maximum was in terms of our own risk tolerance. And we decided that was a good idea. We were able to digest it if we had to. We didn't really want to lose $100,000 if it wasn't a successful project. We pushed ourselves. And 3 years later, our Build a Business contest is one of the reasons for our, at least on the marketing side, for the reason people know us so well. So we understand our own risk tolerance, and I think it's important that you do too. The next thing I want to talk about is ambition. And I think ambition is something that hopefully most of you have as an entrepreneur. And I want to start with an anecdote that sort of struck me as an interesting example of ambition when I was about 16 years old.